I just want to throw out there that if Bernie Sanders wins the presidency, even if he gets no legislation done, that office is so very, very powerful and in control of the regulatory agencies that he can actually fight corporatism like, unilaterally. And that's something I'm sure they fear 100%. But
I
the
think
move to the right by the Democrats has facilitated neoliberalism to blossom and give us all these problems. Back to what I was saying, the power of the president, he can fight an anti-corporatist, war unilaterally, and that would actually, he can actually start putting Democrats in a position where they have to defend corporations. And for the most part, up until now, Democrats have been able to be corporatists because they've been able to kind of shield themselves by saying, well, we're corporatists, but we still care about you a little bit. So here's, something, we'll give you something, yada, yada, yada. But
right.
when you look at it, if Bernie Sanders is in there and he's fighting it alone and they see he has no support from the party, there's going to be enormous pressure on them to back him
Yeah.
and also start moving away from that corporatist paradigm.
Yeah. And that's the what's amazing to me is that I want to talk about two things here, and we are going to go live as soon as Bernie Sanders comes up to the podium. He's not up yet. And also want to make a note here, if just encourage anyone that knows somebody that's in line and you have communication with them, make sure you tell them to stay in line because the percentages matter. That's why we keep refreshing our screen. Bernie Sanders, if he wins by anything less than 6 points, people are going to try to spin this to say that it wasn't a significant enough win. So we want him to keep the 7 points. So every single vote matters. If you know someone who's still in line, send out a tweet, send them a text message, and make sure that they stay in line. Now, to that end, I want to backtrack to how this is applicable, Nick, to this election, because what you're saying is true. But the hurdle to him getting into the White House is a very consistent push from the left. And I don't mean the real left. I mean Democrats who think that they're progressive, but they're really not. And they are pushing so many different narratives right now. But thankfully, I can keep up with all of them. The most recent one goes along with something that you said, and it reminded me of it. The most recent one is, if Bernie Sanders wins, then his policies are going to be disruptive. And what about that person who works in higher education? And we get, this is an argument from Jamel Bowie. He said, what about that person and those people who work in education, in higher education? Do you know how disruptive free college and on state level would be for their careers, and how that would shake up, and some people will lose their job? And what about their legitimate concern and opposition? And it goes to this idea that somehow who would benefit from policies being forwarded by Bernie Sanders should somehow now take a moment and say, well, maybe we shouldn't do it because it's going to be too disruptive to the people who are currently benefiting from the status quo.
Okay, what I want to say on that is, first off, I'm sure if we had free college and the federal government funding 66% of colleges at the state level, I'm sure things would change in higher education. Number one, they probably wouldn't have as many administrators or chancellors making those huge salaries for no explainable reason. There would be a lot more power to the federal government to cut some of that out because the students are paying for that now and they
Right.
have no control over. However, with the federal government paying it, they could start to taper that down. But back to the broader point is, when the car came out, did we stop development on the car because people who made horses and buggies and horseshoes were going to lose their jobs? When the
Exactly.
computer came out, did we protect the secretaries, the extra secretaries that they had, or the typists, typewriter people,
Hmm.
because the computer came out and that was no longer needed? This idea that, we can't move forward because the economy is going to change if we move forward with a new idea, so we have to keep it the way it is horrible.
Right.
It's very, very horrible. You can see it in climate change, where we can't move towards a green economy because then people will lose their jobs. It's like, no, there'll be new jobs created, and the new economy, people will shift over. If you
Right.
work in a power plant, whether it's solar or whether it's natural gas, after the actual generation is created, and that, you get to the transmission and all that, it's all the same. The only specifics that change are how the energy is generated. A power plant that's a solar power plant, a power plant
Mhm.
that's a natural gas power plant, they're just power plants. You know, those people actually can cross over and get those jobs.
But this is the nefarious part about it to me, Nick, is that we as people on the left have been told by the DLC style Democrats and leadership of the Democratic Party that we should sacrifice because the American economy has evolved away from us, and that we should be okay. We need to retool. We need to go back to school and find. This is what has been told to us for the last 30 years because America evolved and we needed to adjust. And now we're getting to this position where we're ready to evolve again. We're being told, well, maybe we should slow down because we're not considering the people whose jobs will be in flux and they may not have those same jobs. And we're being told this by the same exact people who told us that we should adjust. The economy is changing and we just need to get with the program.
Yeah, there'll always be people telling you that we need to slow down and we need to do these things first or do that instead of this, and they'll send you basically on a wild goose chase to keep you from really focusing on what you can affect and what you can actually do as a way to just kind of distract and kind of move the narrative away from that. Like I think specifically when you're referring to the person in higher education, you know, just saying that we can't do this because it'll be disruptive. You know, the nature of capitalism is disruptive.
Right.
It concentrates resources in certain areas to the point where it's really, really bad on everything else. And then when we come and try to, you know, kind of get those resources out of that area, it's like, oh no, you can't come and try to change the allocation of resources now. You know, you have to leave it the way it is and figure out another way. It's like, well, this is the only way.